So we believe that Wikipedia is a platform for the creation and dissemination of information, and it's very important to the work that the Art in Our Mind project seeks to do, which is essentially archiving the work of Black women artists, right? So the workshops themselves are something initiated by Fouad, and Charlene is part of the Art in Our Mind project. So these workshops have been open to members of the general public, and they've been kind of increasing or capacitating different people's, ability to populate Wikimedia. So part of that process actually meant introducing different people to Wikipedia, what it is, and the relevance of this online resource. So I actually have Bobby Shabangu, who's the director of Wikipedia South Africa, and Isla Haddow-Flood, who is a writer, editor, and the co-founder of Wikilove's Women. So today we'll be discussing Wikipedia, and we'll be generally speaking about issues such as inclusivity and how do we use this space to do the work of archiving Black women's, intellectual and artistic practice. So I'd just like to ask Bobby to speak more about his experiences with Wikipedia and his interest in Wikipedia. And then Isla will do the same, yes?
Hi everyone. My name is Bobby, and I'm from here in Johannesburg, and I'm involved with the Wikimedia chapter, which is an affiliate of the Wikimedia Foundation that founded the Wikipedia as a project. And what we do really is to talk to people about Wikipedia so that we let them know that it is an open platform where they can put or write about their own stories. So what I do is basically that I just go around and do edit workshop, and I collaborate with different institutions, and that's basically what I do.
Hi, I'm Isla. I'm from Cape Town, but originally from Zimbabwe, and I'm actually trained as a fine artist, but have found my way into the writing of African story, of making sure that Africa has a presence on global platforms, whether that was in film or through creativity, or now through Wikipedia as a platform with which Africans have the ability, people from across Africa have the ability to share their realities with not only with the global audience, but also to change the narrative for that global audience, but also for themselves. Wikipedia is used as one of those vehicles, and in doing so, I have a co-conspirator called Florence Fouad, and we have created an NGO called Wiki in Africa, and we run several programs, one of which is Wikilove's Women, which is run across Africa in 6 different countries, but we also run several education programs, and we also run Wikilove's Africa, which has been going for 5 years, and it's an annual celebration of Africa through photography, and is a way of also changing up narratives around universal concepts, so that when universal concepts are represented on Wikipedia, there are also African representations of those as well. So it's a fun way. It's also about an easy way for people to contribute, so that you don't have to write a whole article. Uploading a photograph is much easier, so it changes the dynamic and the burden of contribution. I could go on for a long.
Please also pass it on to Fouad. We'd really like to get a sense of his interest in Wikipedia and how Wikipedia has been seminal in the Art in Our Mind project.
So So with Art on Our Mind, as you maybe know, which is the organization actually organizing together in 2017 Afems. It was Shadin Khan, Linda Spencer, and at that time we were thinking, how does Art on Our Mind, which is a research project for women of color creatives, how to put knowledge out in the open of women of color research creatives. And so we were discussing this issue, how you would create a database, right? But then who finds the database? Who maintains the database? And also who pays the server? And eventually I just came across someone saying you could use Wikipedia, and I contacted, luckily, Isla Haddow-Flood, who helped us while we were still at Rhodes to start a very basic self-taught workshop where we mapped out how could we set it out, what are our problems in terms of what are challenges. So we started actually strategizing. So also this session is actually aimed at kind of how can we strategize in terms of for our research projects, how do we get knowledges out there where you have a host of very interesting academic research. Where does this end? You know, in the WITS thesis system, in the UCT thesis system, or in any other kind of online thesis, but they have their own keywords, and it's very, so you have to know how to get there. So what we want to do is find actually young academics and actually make Wikipedia not only accessible, but also show them how it can be a tool for their works, and how can we make our research visible on that platform.
Alright, thank you. So something that I'm picking up from both Isla and Fouad is the idea of openness. So I'm under the impression that Wikipedia is essentially supposed to function as a community, so people collectively working towards populating the online encyclopedia. So someone can initiate by writing an article, and then people can continue, by either updating that article. So it's a collective endeavor. But I think that's more of the ideal. In reality, Wikipedia is a very contested space. So can we just speak about some of the reasons why Wikipedia is such a contested space? I'm not going to lead the conversation, but I'm going to let you take the floor.
Do you want to start?
Bobby, you start.
All right. The first time I was introduced to Wikipedia, I was a radio producer. And I'm coming originally from Mpumalanga province, and the radio producer that I was working for is a Siswati radio station. It was under the SABC. So every time I would go to Wikipedia, I would type something. As a producer, you have to put up the show together. After typing something, every time I noticed that Wikipedia was the first link on the internet, and then after that I dig there, and then I would have to then translate from the English to Siswati. And then I give it to my presenters so that they can, present the show. But I saw that you can actually edit yourself. There's a button there that said edit. And I then started editing. I then started putting information together, and then I said save, and then I could see that the information is actually in there. But soon afterwards, I received a message that said your edit has been reverted. And I'm asking myself, why is this? Because I know this thing, it has happened. It's happened here in South Africa, and it's something that I've seen, that's happened, that I know, I'm 100% sure that it happened. But only to find out that it's not only me who is writing there, but it is a collaborative effort. There are other people out there. And those people, they might not be here, but they are also part of the community, and there is a code that guides them on how the information is put in there. You don't just put information, and then they started telling me about the 5 pillars of Wikipedia, where you're not supposed to write as if it's a soap drama, where you're not supposed to write when you're not supposed to write as if it's an advertisement. And then that's when I started learning. So part of why the Wikipedia is contested, it's because of the system, of the rules that have been developed over the years. that guides how a Wikipedia needs to be written. And the wars that are happening, or the information to be reverted, it's because of the people that are in there and the way they interpret those rules. So for my part is this, but you want to add something?
So I often talk about how I believe Wikipedia started. Yeah, so I believe it was like, at one stage it was like this one horse town, you know, and there was like a group of people who gathered around like a water hole, and that they all got together, they found a commonality, and then it attracted more people, and it became like a market town, and then it became a town, and then it became a city, and then now it's basically a country. Yes. It is massive, and it is the most diverse and multicultural country, because it includes people from all over the world, and they all have different languages, and they have all of their purviews. They all have their own blinkered ways of seeing the world. So you're dealing, when you work on Wikipedia, you're dealing with multiple realities, multiple ideas and multiple viewpoints, which I think is very healthy. But the majority of the people is changing now, but the majority of the people who are in like the authority positions or in the kind of the administrative spaces are the ones who were from the beginning. So they're the ones who, you know, the guard is changing, yes, but there's some resistance to that change. And most of those people are white men who are writing from their perspective of the global north. And so it's very difficult for people, for men and women, to write from spaces like Africa, where not only is it a hard task anyway because of all these established rules that you have to navigate, it is a hard task because we don't have those levels of media coverage, and we don't have those levels of citation. It's difficult to get into the universities. There's multiple, powers, the balance of power for even academic papers is hugely skewed towards the north. And so those are also multiple, they have a knockdown effect to the stories that we can tell and the realities we can present. And so it's a very complicated and very complex matter, but there is also, from our side, as in the meta side, there's also, we're dealing with many issues including how colonialism colonized our minds and made us feel less confident in contributing to a global kind of space. And that is what we're also fighting constantly, that people don't feel that their views and their values and their identity are as valuable as what's already expressed. So it's about, the work that we do is to try and equalize that balance and empower people.
I really appreciate what you both have spoken about, particularly this idea of criteria, the set of rules and regulations, you know, that govern Wikipedia. But I think it's also very important to understand, and this is something that Isla's highlighting, how Wikipedia exists within a broader context of power dynamics. So Wikipedia is very, especially in South Africa, still populated by, or dominated by white men who not only have the resources in terms of money, access, they also have time,
yes,
right? So to sit down and do the research and populate Wikipedia. So part of, I think, mitigating that would be to get a greater buy-in from the public, from black women, black people more generally, but it's very difficult. So what do you think are some of the challenges that have led to that being the case?
In 2014, we actually ran a survey in South Africa to find out how many Wikipedians are there, or who edits on Wikipedia. And lo and behold, we were not surprised to find out that, as Isla said, it's white males, and they are in the tech industry, most of them. And when it came to women, I think it was 8% of women. And when it came to black women, I think it was none, 0. you know. So now, when you look at those statistics and then you think, if you put a group of men together in a room to edit Wikipedia, what kind of content is going to come out? What would be the outcome from there? Surely it would be different. When you put a group of women in one room and then say, just edit, obviously they're going to edit about food, they're going to edit about clothes, they're going to edit about things that concerns them. They're going to edit about arts and culture. They're going to edit about engineering. But women in engineering, they're going to edit about musicians that are forming, that are popular in South Africa, but who are women. The content will be different from when men edit. When you put together a group of men who are in the tech industry who edits, and we can see this. That's why in Wikipedia today, there is more content from the United States and from Europe than African content. And to address directly your question, there are a lot of things that are causing black South African women to not edit Wikipedia. Number one is because it's a very hostile space, especially in the English Wikipedia. If you want to edit about anything that you want to edit about, that is African, first you're going to be told that where's notability for that? Yeah, so it means that you're going to have to go to the Vets library somewhere and then find that notability, and then after that reference that. That's number one. Number two, you find out that people don't have time. Number three, you find out people don't understand about volunteerism, the space where people come together and just volunteer, just put information online. Yeah, they think, they would ask you, I'm from Elushi Negas. How am I going to be paid again? How much am I going to get? So those are the kinds of things that we hear in South Africa as a chapter to say, hey, you can actually add information online. It's free. You don't have to pay money or do whatever it is that you think we can, to put that information online. Yeah.
Sorry, can I just comment before passing to Isla and Fouad? I think I get what you're saying in terms of how different constituencies will obviously populate Wikipedia differently. Yeah. And I know that recently, having entered the whole Wikipedia space, as a black woman feminist, I am unashamedly going to write about black women. Yes. And I think that's precisely why it's important to have different constituency come to the fore, because we have a grander picture of what's going on in South Africa and everyone is represented. So it's not necessarily a bad thing. Yes.
Absolutely. I think one of the main issues is, well, I think there are two. So one is that people, because there isn't the groundswell of people writing about African stories and about African histories and biographies and realities, people don't see themselves reflected. So you're not going to get involved with something that you don't feel part of. Yes. So it's a catch-22 situation in that. Then there is also people are looking for permission. So I held a lot of workshops at a school on the East Rand of Johannesburg, and one of my things was to say in Swahili, yeah, yes, and one of my things was, this is what the Wikipedia article looks like for Soweto or for Guguletu. What does your Wikipedia article look like? And it literally had 2 lines on it. And so I said, so what does this make you feel like? And these are kids, grade 10 kids. And they were ashamed. They were like, nobody cares about us. It's awful. Look how terribly people think about us. And I said to them, it's not about how people think about you. It's about how you should think about yourself. And you have the power to take that. And they did. They wrote. So if you look at the article, it's now a fully complete article written by grade 10 kids. And it really is an amazing thing, but it shows you the power. And after that, it was literally like a light. They just went, this is, yes, absolutely. We mustn't leave it up to other people to represent us. It is our responsibility to represent our interests and our experiences. And I think that is the change. It's because of apartheid, because of colonialism, we're all looking for that permission. I mean, I even was, yes, I was also doing it, and it's exactly that, you know. We have to give ourselves the permission to do it and to make the change, because there's so many stories, so much. It can't be left up to 5 people or 10 people, and it can't be bottlenecked by that. Okay.
I don't have much to say, just want to expand on the different languages, right? So we had also the Wikipedia South Africa member, Dumisani Lobo, who actually is doing the Chisonga, right? Yes. Wikipedia. So he basically populates the full Chisonga language Wikipedia. And so that means, like, if we take Isla's metaphor of the village, right? I mean, it is about people finding out, is there a space, also in terms of languages, right? For people to just, like, you put your knowledge and you are not under the scrutiny of, you know, the white northern knowledge space. And what would be ideal, I think, is then actually have translations in both directions. And to how can one actually create knowledges from the epicenters of our agency, which is like saying, this is what I'm interested in, and that I think also there is this thing, you know, like it is still, I think, seen as a heteronormative space. In a very weird way, I think that, you know, like when you go to university and there's still lots of lecturers who say, don't use Wikipedia. Don't fool yourself. Everyone uses Wikipedia. If I teach a first year course on art history and I forgot what was Impressionism, I just look it up and I make a summary of the Wikipedia article. Sorry to say, and I'm not referencing it because I just draw the references. So, because I think people have to also accept it and say, no, it is a real good tool. Mm-hmm. And it's not perfect, but hello, the Encyclopedia Britannica is also not perfect. It's, the last year's edition is today already. You can shred it. So we have to also say, knowledge is never perfect. It is always being done by people who sit together and do knowledge. And so if we do conferences like this, and there's knowledge being done, this is where I think there is the power in, and we will go to there right now, what we have in here on screen.
So Fouad, you actually touched on my last question. So there are a number of ways in which Wikipedia as a resource has been delegitimized, especially within the academic sphere. I remember in first year, I was told by my lecturers not to ever use Wikipedia because it's unreliable and things of that nature. So I want to ask, what are some of the ways in which, or rather, are you thinking about legitimizing Wikipedia? Because like Fouad is saying, it is such a reliable resource and it's also very important, right? So what are the measures that you have in place to make sure that people can understand the importance of Wikipedia?
Okay, one of the reasons why we are here as a chapter in South Africa is to collaborate with what we call mission-aligned institutions. So this it involves galleries, libraries, archives, and museums. But we go a step further to also speak to universities, to teach lecturers and academics to say, you know, that conversation that you always tell your students about Wikipedia, for your students to never ever use Wikipedia. It's actually true. True. Yes. Students must never ever reference Wikipedia. But there is a way they can do that. I don't know if I can use this example right here. So, for an example, this article right here, you can never reference it. Why? Because it's changing, number one. It's dynamic. What you can find today, you cannot find tomorrow. The information will be changed. But you can go to the references of the reference. The references of this article. Yes. And then you click there. That will never change. So I think we need now to be more, what is the word? Aggressive when it is with our outreach to go to universities and go to academia to say, hey, you know, that conversation is right. Students should not reference Wikipedia, but they can reference the references of Wikipedia. We should teach them how Wikipedia can be used as a source of reference in academics.
Also, it has been proven that Wikipedia is as reliable, if not more so, than Encyclopedia Britannica, and that was 9 years ago.
Yes.
So it's not even, so not only has it vastly improved, it also has a massive community, which part of the reason why it's difficult to contribute to Wikipedia is we have this massive community who is constantly checking sources and constantly making sure that, so it's very irritating because you write an article about somebody who you are hero worship, you know, say like Patricia McFadden, and then you have to fight for it because people are going, is this person notable? Where have these sources come from? I don't recognize the Citizen. Okay, well then this is the Citizen that is this. Then write an article about the Citizen so that it has an established reliability, validity on Wikipedia. So there's in the background there's this whole thing that's going on, and I understand why ages ago why professors said that, but I just don't think that it's relevant in the same way that it used to be. And one of the other things is that I had a professor come up to me and say, oh, but if you're going to, you know, I find it wrong. And I'm like, you're the expert. Change it. Yes. You can change it. Why are you leaving this information out there? If it's wrong, change it. You have the sources. And so that was, you know, they were like, okay. But that's the stuff that's absolutely beholden to us. And if we can see, it's not just about how the information is there. It's also about the different perspectives that
yes.
come from different people. So, say Shaka Zulu, yes? It's written by white British men, yes? Given the context of colonialism and the wars that happened at that time. And so therefore, it's not the same as if it had been written by a Zulu man or somebody who had been displaced by Shaka, like an Ndebele grouping. So there are multiple realities that are part of the truth or part of knowledge, and so therefore what Wikipedia allows is to have those multiple perspectives represented in the same area. And I think that is the power, but also to have where perspectives change and where new information comes in, that knowledge is organic. It's not just something that's set in stone. And I think that's where the power of Wikipedia is as well.
Just good. I wrote an article and I said, because my favorite team, I love soccer. My favorite team is Orlando Pirates. So I wrote about one player there. I said Jerry Skosana is the best player in South Africa. You know? And it was quickly reverted to say, no. What kind of language are you using there? Is he the best player or considered to be the best player in South Africa? So that is what I just want to reiterate on the statement of that is said by to say it is a collective effort, but there is also a concerted effort to try and make it to be more neutral, to reach that balance of neutrality. So, yeah.
Sorry. So I wanted to just point out, because I'm not sure if we're phrase it. So I wanted to point out that when I arrived here on Thursday morning, Fouad and I went through a little exercise. So I immediately, when Patricia McFadden was doing her keynote, I immediately went into Wikipedia to see if she had done, if she was represented. Yes, she is, but she doesn't have a picture. Okay. Now, part of the othering and part of the silencing, the violence of the silence, is that we are not seen, that women, especially women of colour, are not viewed. So there are no pictures of her, and so therefore she's not considered human, and so therefore her contributions are not as weighted as somebody who you can see as a person, yes? And so therefore, Patricia, and then I went through, I asked Fouad to give me like all of the names of all of the previous keynote speakers at Afems. And Patricia and also, she had been put on, but she'd been put on with another project that I had run earlier, about a few years ago. And so actually one person has been, or two people out of 9, who are established theorists within African feminism, are not on Wikipedia. So not only that their pictures do not exist, they do not exist on Wikipedia. And that to me, I mean, they are published, they are well known, they are icons to people within our grouping, and it's just, it's staggering that these people are not given the due course and are not present, and so therefore cannot be referenced by new, or found by new people who are interested in this discourse. So it's just we're changing that. We are going to, with the help of Mia and her colleagues, we're going to be putting up pictures of all of the people who will be speaking and who hopefully will have, one day, will have their own Wikipedia pages written for them.
So what's emerging from this conversation is that this issue of delegitimization is maybe a consequence of people feeling that they're not represented by Wikipedia. And I do think that the only way to mitigate that is for us to start using Wikipedia as a platform, despite the obvious issues around access, time, that type of thing. I really would encourage anyone who is interested in Wikipedia to join our workshops that Fouad hosts. He always makes a call on Vanza, on Twitter, on social media, that type of thing. I think it's very important that we start not only owning these stories, but making them readily accessible. So on that note, I'm going to open it up to the floor. If you guys have any questions, this is your time. Kudai has a question.
Yeah, sure.
A few questions, all right.
Okay. Hello. I have 2-3 questions and some commentary sort of like in between. Thank you so much for all the words. So I just wanted to start by moving back to sort of like the challenges that you guys were speaking to earlier. I was thinking that for me personally, and especially sort of like coming out of those Wikipedia workshops that we had, trying to generate questions and thinking around how to make Wikipedia more accessible, the big thing that sort of like came out of that discussion was thinking about how the interface in itself sort of favors and uses a language system that isn't sort of readily accessible to many, right? So my question then becomes like, how do we change that? And then sort of just riffing off of that, I think what you're saying then about sort of Wikipedia being an open space for multiple narratives, I agree in that there's potential there, but currently I don't think it is. Just in terms of, like it not being accessible, right? Like people not knowing sort of like, even if you were to sort of start introducing or getting together a group of people who, might be interested in editing, the system in itself, is sort of coded in a way that is really difficult. Like, I mean, when I started, I was like, I don't know how to do this, right? Even using some of the what is it called? Like those like tutorials and things, like it gets really, really confusing, all right? And then I feel like those things also sort of, I don't know, like might be things that make people feel like reluctant to share or to sort of like get onto the platform. My second question is about sort of legitimacy, right? And thinking about like my question is, how do we legitimize without sort of setting or moving according to standards that begin to further delegitimize like other knowledge systems, right? So thinking about how what Bobby was talking about in terms of referencing, right? I feel like Wikipedia sort of already sort of, okay, I'm just going to read the thing that I wrote and then it'll make sense. But it says here, it already sort of does this, whatever this is, we'll find out just now, in the ways in which it demands for us to sort of reference also using Western methods, right? And I say this thinking about like this ongoing conversation about like recording and tracking oral histories, right? Like how do we reference that? And how do we make that like accessible, and how do we make that process? And I don't think the conversation should be about legitimizing, right? Because the moment we start speaking about legitimizing, like sort of in the same breath we're saying that there's something we are delegitimizing, there's something that isn't legitimate. And I feel like if we're thinking about Wikipedia and how it functions within an African context, sort of recording and tracking African sort of stories, there should be a way of doing that using systems that already sort of that weren't birthed from Western systems, right? There is sort of a tracking system that we just, and it's going to be hard, but there definitely needs to be some kind of effort made to do that without feeling like we're feeding that information into a pre-existing system that favors Western standards, because I don't think it's going to work otherwise.
Yeah.
Sorry, that's a long sort of thing, but those are my words.
Very good. Anyone else? Anyone else?
I have one question only. Can we add, not only theoretically, practically, to someone like Patricia McFadden on the bottom, where it says, Sihle, would you please scroll down to the bottom of the page? Just like where there is categories, right? So, and now, so, there's so you see there's categories. So what
At the bottom.
all the way down. So this is like where we have categories. So it is. So this is a person who belongs to the group of living people, and you have a whole list. Now, can we add here Afems conference keynote speaker? That's my question.
Yeah, we can create actually that category.
Okay, I want this on record.
Got it.
So I'm going to try and answer some parts of your question, and then I'm going to hand it over to Bobby to also do his.
Sure.
So I agree with the first bit in that it is difficult to the access, like the ability to access. They are very aware of this. So the Wikipedia Foundation is in charge of the advancement of the tech of the actual software, which is a media wiki, which is what is based on the wiki, and it's what all the wikis basically use. As media wiki is the basic. And they've been doing a whole load of stuff around visual editor, so that you have a much more kind of Google Doc kind of interface rather than the kind of the coded interface that most of us kind of grew up with on. So that they are working on accessibility. Both of us were recently in Stockholm at Wikimania, and I was collared by one of the design people, and the changes to the interface that they're making are very exciting. It's making it much more interesting. There's also, I don't know how much you know, but there's been a process for 4 years now where we're investigating our strategic direction as a community. Not just the Wikimedia Foundation, but basically the entire community, the whole movement is coming together, and that's why strategy salons are being held here with Bobby. And I'm going to Tunisia to go and work on advocacy there. But one of the areas there is diversity, because, as Joey said, that it's the sum of all human knowledge, yes, and it can't just be the sum of Western knowledge, which means that we have to, part of the conversations in diversity are about access, a big part is about access, like who's reading, how are they reading, and are there auditory ways? Are there people who don't want to be literate but want to learn? You know, so there's or cannot read for whatever reason. There's how do we facilitate that? And there's also and in that way, we've also been talking. It wasn't without a fight, but now there's a concerted effort to look into how do we represent or cite oral histories as well in a way that it's not a compromise, but is in a way that how do we do that? So how do we also reference traditional medicines in the same way with the same weighting that we do medical, allopathic medicines? So very different kind of way. So those are the conversations that we're having. It doesn't mean that it's immediately going to be solved. It's Wikipedia is the community. It's a brave new world that we're in, but there's a lot of traditional kind of thinking, and there's a lot of So it's always a little bit tense. It's always a bit interesting, but it is moving on, and I cannot tell you how different it is from like 6 years ago or 10 years ago. So yeah. And then there's this other thing which is about being bold. Yes, it's not accessible, you don't feel accessible. I understand that it's hard to get started in it, but it is about claiming your space. It's about making sure that there is that space. And that increasingly, from a black feminist point of view, there are those spaces all across. There's Afro-Crowd, which is from in both America and in the UK. There is a new grouping which is in France, which is basically Afro-Crowd but for French people, which is Noir Wiki or whatever. And there's Black Lunch Table. There's also Black History. There's a whole range of different people who are now coming on. They're mainly diasporic, but also there's across Africa with the programs that we've been working on, and with Wiki and Dava, there's also a lot more people who are also being invested across. So there, increasingly, there's more of us. There's more people that, so we need to claim the space because it needs to represent the knowledge of all people. So so we need to make sure that it's represented by the people who live it.
I think your questions are very much very important, and there was one recommendation when I was running the strategy salon here, that when you are using WhatsApp, for example, that thing hooks you up. What is it that thing that just hooks you up to use WhatsApp? Or when you're using Facebook, there's that thing that hooks you up to continuously use social media like Facebook. A lot of people were complaining that Wikipedia and its texts, the way you edit on Wikipedia, it's not something that is what is the word that Steve Jobs used when he created Apple? That visual, not visual, but it needs to attract you so that you just use it seamlessly,
Intuitive.
Yeah, intuitive. It's not intuitive. Yes, that's the word. Wikipedia is not intuitive. So, what I like about Wikimedia is the fact that the rules and regulations and laws and how it's developing, it's not what they call in corporate language top-down approach, but it's bottom up. So being bottom up, the foundation listens to people, and they try as much as they can, and they admit this. They don't say we are stars, we're going to change the world, we're going to do whatever, we're going to implement now, and we are Superman, we're just going to change it. Like, no. They try, they then get into a process of trying to change what the community is saying through the funds that they collect from the donations around the world. Using that money, they try to build sort of like an app. There is an app right now. I'm not happy with that app. I'm using it, it's there on my phone. I don't use that app. It's terrible, and they know it as well. And you cannot edit with that thing. So when I edit, I use the site. I'm still enjoying to edit using the old style Wikipedia, where that one that's difficult for you. But Wikipedia has tried to create something called a visual editor, Still, people are finding it difficult to edit using it, but yeah, I think Isla, what she has said, she was really on point. They are trying to make a concerted effort to just try and improve Wikipedia. Regarding the other knowledges that are available, that are there, we are still in the process actually that it's still going on regarding that one. And there was a war initially to say this thing of oral citation is just only batin is Swazi, it's just only folklore, it's just only some stories that, but that by itself, it actually sidelines a whole lot of people, it actually sidelines a whole continent. They realized that, and they're wanting to change it as we're going forward. So we're hoping that in the future, we're going to find a way that is comfortable for us as Africans to add our histories. I contributed in an article about Lobolo. Lobolo, there's not a lot of references out there. You have to ask your grandmother, they will tell you. This is knowledge that is passed down from generation to generation. You know, you cannot ask and go and ask about this cow, what is it for? That cow, what is it for? Why is it Lobola? How is it done? It's you, your hands needs to write that there, you know, as an African. But you don't have a reference to say, I reference Professor so-and-so from England who came here and who was a, what are those people that are writing about cultures again? Anthropologist who came and made research. I research him so that I can write about them. No, it's me. I know this thing. It's been passed from my generation. You know, so those are the kinds of things that actually encourages me to continue writing about Wikipedia while they're still working on improving some of the knowledge to be included in Wikipedia.
Thank you so much to Isla and Bobby for engaging us, right? And then to the crowd, I hope to be seeing you in our next Wikipedia workshop.
Can I just give a very short announcement before everyone leaves? So, if you go online, there we go. So on our website of Art on Our Mind, so you see we have presents for the workshops where there are the announcement of the next workshops. And we have a workshop on oral histories on Friday, the 20 September. So we will have people from the oral histories here at this. Nur Miftahuddin will come and speak on oral histories and how can we make oral histories accessible in terms of research. So everyone who is interested, please join us. And so we will continue the workshops throughout the year every month. Is there anything that panelists want to say in closing? Because we are being basically asked to leave the venue.
So what I'd like to say is, if you don't do it, no one will do it for you. That's my message to you. We are a room full of people that have stories. You are the one that needs to tell your own story.
Okay. Thank you very much to Isla and Bobby to come and for Sihle moderating this panel, and thanks for everyone to come and attend.